Shabbat Shalom, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another sermon here at Nazarene Way Church. Welcome to our budding little house church that is going to be growing and starting and being a part of the Nazarene and the Ebionite revolution, the Ebionite and Nazarene revival. We are here to restore the original actions and the original teachings of Jesus the Nazarene. Note, I did not say Jesus of Nazareth, I said Jesus the Nazarene. Jesus was not a Jew. He was not a Christian. In fact, if he came back today, he would definitely be the furthest thing from a Christian. Jesus was a revolutionary who restored and brought forth the way of actually acting and following the true Torah, not the perverted Torah of the Leviticus high priests, but the true Torah and actually walking in the way. And what did Jesus believe in? Jesus believed in, he just lays it out there. It's just so simple. Love the Lord God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. Love your neighbor as yourself, and take care of the poor ones, the Ebionites, the Ebionim. And if you want to see a more elaborate teaching on Jesus's views on taking care of the Ebionites, we have to look no further than James the Just, James the actual brother of the Lord, which is what Eusebius calls him. James is, just read the letter of James. And again, Jesus was not a Jew. He was not a Christian. He was what is called a Nazarene, which comes from the group, essentially the root netzer, NZR, which essentially means to essentially consecrate yourself off and branch off like the branch of David. It's like the shoot or the branch of David, and to separate yourself from every other person out there. And when I say separate yourself from every other person out there, what I'm really kind of referring to is the sad state of modern day religion, wherein modern day religion is, okay, hey, especially in Southern California, hey, let's go over to, church and then just, sit in the stands and the bleachers, listen to some cool worship music, and then go home and feel good about ourselves, while we eat a steak from Applebee's afterwards. Like, that is modern day Pauline Gentile Christianity. And it's a really sad state, because what Jesus fought for and what he believed in is actually getting out there on the streets and serving the poor ones, serving the Ebionim, serving the Ebionites. And that, my friends, is actually why I was not conducting a sermon last Friday. Last Friday was a holiday, the 4th of July, and the very next day, I went with my good friend Cam Waters, who created Christspiracy, and you should check it out at Christspiracy.com. It's free to watch this fantastic documentary. And one of Cam's, I think, social media followers or something gave us an idea to go out and spread, the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God, through sharing the daily bread. And what is the best type of daily bread? Well, it's pizza. And so we decided to go out and purchase $1,000 worth of vegan, vegetarian pizzas. It was flesh-free. No animals were slaughtered and killed because, obviously, believe it or not, Jesus would not be a fan of 90 billion animals suffering and dying and being slaughtered every single year in some, massive slaughterhouse, some mass production slaughterhouse. Believe it or not, I know that might be shocking to you, but that's not essentially following the way and the action of Jesus. So in order to actually follow the way, the action of Jesus, we decided to get some vegan pizzas, $1,000 worth. It was like 55 pizzas or something like that. And we went out on the streets of Venice Beach, California, and we handed out pizzas, and we fed and got down on our knees and handed out pizza boxes to every single poor one, poor person. We fed a single mother with 3 kids. We gave all the single mom and all of her 3 kids pizza boxes, right? She had an amazing story. And we fed people like Vietnam vets, so a guy with a missing leg, right? We fed a guy that everyone was stepping over in Venice Beach. He was eating like Cheetos that were piled on the floor, just picking them up on this dirty, disgusting sidewalk in an alley. People were stepping over him. And what did we do? We stopped. We said, hey, what's your name? fist bump. His hand was black, covered in soot. It was disgusting. It was dirty. And I thought of actually at that time when I fist bumped him, I'm like, shoot, like, is this responsible of me? I have like a, 10-month-old son. What if like I, get him sick, but I'm like, you know what? Screw it. What would Jesus have done? Jesus would have got down on his knees, gave this man a fist bump, looked him in the eye and said, what's your name, brother? I'm here for you. I'm here to feed you. And I gave him a pizza box, right? And fed that man, fed the poor ones, just like Jesus did. And I know it may be like kind of crazy and shocking to you, but like that is what Jesus did. And that's what we are called to do. And as James outlines in the letter of James, which is essentially hidden in the back of the New Testament, he says, what good is faith without works? What good is faith without works? We need to actually choose action over faith. We are brainwashed in this society that all you have to do is attend a Grey Glory Harvest Festival, get all, sappy and start crying and run to the front of the stadium, raise your hand in the air and say, I want to be saved. Well, believe it or not, that's not the way to get saved. The way to get saved is to follow the words and the actions that Jesus the Nazarene stood for, which is just what I laid out. You must act. Jesus came not to essentially abolish the Torah, abolish the law, but to fulfill it. And you must continue acting, right? Action matters more than just professing faith, right? And so anyway, that's what I was doing this past Saturday. I was on the grassroots feeding the Ebionites, feeding the poor ones, feeding the Ebionim is the Hebrew, I guess, way of saying it, and really taking action. And that is something that I want our community to, move towards. That is our focus constantly. Our focus is not, learning some Vatican rules and learning about, hey, I hear the Pope is a big fan of the White Sox. No, none of that bullshit matters. What matters is you actually getting out into the streets, feeding the poor ones, taking action and following the actual paths and way of Jesus the Nazarene. It's sad to see the state of religion today because everyone is just majoring in the minor. They're focusing on the wrong things. You need to start focusing on what matters. We need to keep the main thing the main thing. Let's follow the words of Jesus the Nazarene, not the words of a man who claimed that he saw an apparition of Jesus and basically teaches everything that is opposite of what Jesus taught. And I'm talking about Paul of Tarsus, which is what Christianity is built upon. So, with that segue, with that segment, basically me getting all fired up, and hopefully you can tell, I want to transition into a few more things to cover with you today. So right now, I am reading this fantastic book by Hugh Schonfield, and it is called Those Incredible Christians. It has a fantastic cover here. And I want to read something to you from this book because I was kind of like blown away when I first read it. And it was something, even if you were educated and well-read in the realm of restoring the way and restoring the Nazarene sect and restoring the Ebionite sect, meaning the true disciples that walked with Jesus in his true teachings, then this may still even surprise you, because it surprised me. So I was reading this section on the post-war reconstruction of what essentially happened after the temple was essentially destroyed, the Jerusalem temple. And Schonfield says on page 161, he says, in the end, though there was a spirited but belated endeavor by the Nazarenes to hit back with counter propaganda. And what he's talking about is the Roman Empire essentially and Paul kind of ensconced themselves together. And Paul's propaganda essentially was engulfed by the Romans, and it just spread. And this is interesting. I'll point something out. So the Nazarenes to hit back with counter propaganda, Roman Catholicism could not be unseated at that point. The response, when it could be made, came much too late, since by the end of the 2nd century, most of the churches subscribed to the new orthodoxy and the documents which had aided its establishment and were widely regarded as divinely inspired. So here's what's interesting that I want to point out about this section, is that I did not realize that the Nazarenes essentially saw that the Romans and their propaganda and Paul had essentially kind of gone like off the tracks with its message. They were teaching something that was counter to what those who walked with Jesus, his original disciples, I'm talking James the Just, I'm talking Simon Peter, aka Cephas the Rock, I'm talking all the people that actually knew Jesus and his descendants, like those that actually heard from the disciples and knew people that knew the disciples, right? All the descending line, they saw this kind of freaking cascading waterfall in this, essentially thing that kind of ran off the rails and was just this massive snowball compiling. And they tried to counter this propaganda machine, but it was much too late. It was much too late because it was the end of the 2nd century, which is, let's say like around 170 CE, right? So at that time, that's like 140 years after the death of Jesus the Nazarene, you had all of these different, amalgamations of faith being just like, propagated, right? And the biggest one was the Gentile, Romanized, Roman pagan cult of Pauline Christianity. And it's sad because, like, at that time, they saw they saw this happening. And it's kind of like they're like trying to counter it, but it was just way too late in the 2nd century, right? And then, what happened after that is the Nazarenes, they were persecuted not only by the patristics, meaning the church fathers, meaning by this massive, like, this Roman pagan cult called Catholicism growing in this incipient state, but also the Jews who were in their, like, horrible state because their temple was just destroyed. And they were like, in this bad state. They also had a daily curse against the Nazarenes. So the Nazarenes, this remaining group of the original followers of Jesus, were essentially like, pushed out and killed off, and their line died, and it continued on in this Roman pagan cult essentially invented by Paul of Tarsus. And so anyway, I was like curious about this. I'm like, what do you mean that the Nazarenes hit back with counter propaganda? And so this sent me to a footnote, and it sent me to the footnote of the Clementine homilies and recognitions. And I went and also the epistles of Paul were expressly rejected, and he was called an apostate from the law. And I believe Irenaeus was the one to recount that. So, like, we have evidence that the Nazarenes and the Ebionites and those who followed and were from the original descendants of Jesus the Nazarene said, who is this crazy guy Paul who never met Jesus and is claiming that he saw, an apparition, a white light that, gave him all of these, teachings that ran counterintuitive and were essentially the exact opposite of the Jesus that we actually knew and loved and walked with, actually physically walked with. So anyway, I looked up the footnote, and I want to share just one of them. There's several of them with you. And what is very clear here, this is a book, this is the sacred writings, the Clementine literature, which is, usually labeled as the pseudo-Clementines. And we have a group chat with my fellow brothers, my fellow Nazarenes, people like Aaron Abke and James Benefico. I don't know if I butchered his last name. And Cam Waters and Chris, who runs a fantastic channel, the Ebionite Mystic. Look him up on YouTube. And if I remember it, if my ADHD brain doesn't go, get distracted after this sermon, I will also provide a link to Chris's fantastic YouTube channel that you should check out, the Ebionite Mystic. Anyway, there's several others of us on this this group chat, which is just so profound. I've learned so much. Just all of us kind of tackling and restoring the original Nazarenes and the original, Ebionites and the original, essentially, belief and religion of Jesus. Anyway, we were having a conversation or a text thread with them. I think it was yesterday, and I was like, I pointed out, I was like, how crazy is it, that like the Clementine literature is referred to as the pseudo-Clementine literature. It's always prepended with pseudo. Oh, it's pseudo-Clementine because we don't think Clementine wrote it, right? Yet, the scholarly consensus is that most of the New Testament books are also all pseudonymous, which means we don't actually know who wrote them. We don't know that Mark wrote the Gospel of Mark. We don't know that Matthew actually wrote the Gospel of Matthew. The one exception is we believe that Luke wrote both Luke and Acts. But other than that, John, there's likely scholarly consensus is no way John wrote the Gospel of John. Same with many other books, even Revelation. There's people don't know what John actually, the supposed John actually wrote it. But what you'd never see is oh, here's a reading from the pseudo John. Here's a reading from pseudo Revelation, right? Like it's only these labels of these heretical books, right, are like there's these subtle things that they do to them, like labeling it pseudo Clementine literature that they try to discredit it. But when you actually look beyond the Wikipedia entry, look beyond what crap GPT says, you will actually unearth some really compelling, interesting tidbits. And once you see it, you'll see like, wow, there's a lot of smoke here. And guess what? Usually when there's smoke, there's fire. And if you open your eyes and your mind to the Clementine literature and actually read it, and you'll actually see even, it was referred to the Acts of the Nazarenes, and the travels and writings of Peter. And we know from Epiphanius, Angry Epi, the psycho, that the Nazarenes and the Ebionites, they actually, used this literature, right? And at least perhaps even the source material of this literature. Anyway, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to read to you this section here. And, this is essentially, this opposing figure that butted heads with Peter. And it's quite obviously, if we just kind of open our mind and eyes, that this description fits Paul of Tarsus perfectly. And it's on chapter 19, I believe it is of, I think 17 of the Clementine homilies. And I think it's homily 17, chapter 19, okay? And we read, "If then our Jesus appeared to you in a vision and made himself known to you and spoke to you, it was as one who is enraged with an adversary. And this is the reason why it was through visions and dreams or through revelations that were from without that he spoke to you." So he's saying like, if you encounter Jesus, Paul of Tarsus, it was not through, hey, I'm going to give you, a whole doctrine, a whole essentially religion to event. It was Jesus appeared to you because he was pissed off at you, right? So that's what is actually being said here. And look at this. Okay, so, but can anyone be rendered fit for instruction through apparitions, right? Can anyone be fit for instruction just by you claiming, oh, hey, I saw a white light of Jesus or of God? And we see this over and over and over again with all of these like new crazy cult leaders, like, let's call out the Mormonism, the Mormon cult, right? This guy, claims, who had like this, Joseph Smith, right? This like insane record of getting into trouble with the law and being a charlatan and a snake oil salesman. He claimed that he like put his head into a bag and like was dictated for some reason, a King James version of the Bible in a text called the Book of Mormon that was written, like 2,000 years ago or something. And there's so many other errors and hilarious things in the Book of Mormon, like them claiming, they fought with like iron swords or stuff. And it's like iron wasn't invented till like, 1800 years after the fact of this supposed story that took place, right? So you get a lot of these charlatans like Joseph Smith and like Paul of Tarsus that stake their entire religion that they're starting on an apparition. That's what we're finding here. And if you will say it is possible, then I ask, why did our teacher abide and discourse a whole year to those who were awake, right? So do you see what Peter is saying there? He's like, okay, if Jesus gave you, some special law, why did he walk with us and discourse with us for an entire year teaching us the way if he was just going to override everything he taught us disciples, for a year, right? Why would he do that and create a message from Paul of Tarsus that's the exact opposite of what Jesus the Nazarene stood for? And how are we to believe your word when you tell us that he appeared to you? And how did he appear to you when you entertain opinions contrary to his teaching? But if you were seen and taught by him and became his apostle for a single hour, proclaim his utterances, interpret his sayings, love his apostles, contend not with me who accompanied with him, right? For indirect opposition to me, who am a firm rock, the foundation of the church, you now stand. So, you can go read this fantastic stuff that's like hidden in here. And there's other references in here as well to Paul being the enemy that is essentially teaching a false doctrine, a false teaching that Jesus warned people about. He said, hey, people are going to come after me that are going to be the enemy. And they're going to be teaching the exact opposite of what I teach. And what's hilarious, I did a video a while back, several months back, where I showed what scholars essentially called the great contradictions. Like if you put up the great contradictions, like the words that Jesus said and the words of Paul said, and you just line them up, don't even say, which person said what, you will see that they are directly saying the exact opposite of the other person. And then the true test is saying, okay, which one would you believe, right? Paul is on the left, Jesus is on the right. I don't know about you guys, but I will roll with Jesus. I'll rock with Jesus. I'm not some big fan that, is obsessed with Paul of Tarsus, right? Yet the hilarious, and we see it over and over and over again. History loves irony. The hilarious thing is that Paul's religion bears Jesus' name, but is the exact opposite of what Jesus stood for and taught. What did Jesus stand for and teach? He taught that you should, again, love the Lord God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, love your neighbor as yourself, and take care of the poor ones. Sitting in a stadium arena, rock arena, and going to church isn't actually taking care of the poor ones. That's doing absolutely nothing for the poor ones. You need to step up your faith, take action, take care of the poor ones. If someone is on the corner and you could totally tell that they're poor, right? Do something for them. Give them clothing. It doesn't have to be money. We all know the first thing that pops into our mind with the homeless, they're probably addicted to drugs. Well, guess what? You don't have to give them money, right? You can buy them food. Just stop off, buy them food, give them clothing. Go through your closet, get rid of all of your old clothes, and do not go to some, Salvation Army and just throw it off, drop it off. Jesus called you to look into the eyes of the Ebionites, the poor ones, those who the rest of society steps over when they walk on the sidewalk and ignore. Jesus the Nazarene called you to be a psycho. He called you to literally take out clothes from your closet, buy $1,000 worth of pizza, and go fist bump a homeless man that everyone is ignoring and feed them. That is following the way. That is what the Nazarenes stand for. That's the Ebionites stand for. And that is what we are restoring here at Nazarene Way Church. Peace and love, and I'll see you next week.